Right now, the Hamilton County Coroner's Office collected more than 20 DNA samples. Thousands of remains have been discovered on Herb Baumeister's property.
While investigating the disappearance of several Indianapolis men from the gay community, police discovered the remains of 11 men on a Westfield farm. Men police believe were the victims of the man who lived there, suspected serial killer Herb Baumeister.
Herb Baumeister Jr., the infamous serial killer, once bought a hearse to pick up women for dates nearly a decade before committing his first murder, according to a longtime acquaintance of his father who spoke to Fox News Digital. I believe it was around 1970, though I'm not exactly sure of the date. Herb Jr. bought a hearse, and I remember Dr. Herb Baumeister Sr. being genuinely puzzled and, well, concerned, recounted Minetta Braunstein. Minetta, who worked closely with Dr. Baumeister Sr. from 1966 to 1976 in Indiana hospital surgeries, described him as a considerate man who would often ensure she got home safely after long shifts. Throughout their time together, he shared snippets of worry about his son, long before Herb Jr.'s horrific crimes came to light. Years later, Herb Jr. was linked to at least 25 murders during the 1980s and 1990s, with many victims buried on his sprawling Fox Hollow Farm property in Westfield, Indiana. Police uncovered over 10,000 charred and crushed bone fragments on the grounds after Baumeister took his own life as authorities closed in. To date, the Hamilton County coroner has identified 8 victims, with DNA profiles of 4 more still awaiting identification, bringing the confirmed body count to 12, according to coroner Jeff Jellison. Reflecting on those earlier days, Minetta vividly recalls Dr. Baumeister's reaction to his son's unusual purchase of the hearse. Herb Jr. said it was a practical way to get around and go on dates. Dr. Baumeister just couldn't understand it, Minetta said, noting how this and other signs in retrospect seemed to weigh heavily on the father. At that time, Herb Jr. was somewhat of a loner. He had few friends, struggled in school, and lacked interest in sports or extracurricular activities. He dropped out of college after just 1 semester, and despite his father's encouragement to return to study anatomy, he failed to complete even the first term. I remember Dr. Baumeister being very disappointed when Herb Jr. dropped out, Braunstein recalled. She only met Herb Jr. once during his college years, describing their encounter as ordinary, discussing mundane topics that he steered. Despite his polite demeanor, it's now chilling to reflect on that encounter, she admitted. Minetta, emotional at times during her recollections, struggled to reconcile her memories of the kind Dr. Baumeister with the monstrous actions of his son. In 1971, concern over Herb Jr.'s behavior peaked when he was committed to a mental institution 6 months after marrying Juliana Sater. Herb Jr. later became a father of 3 and managed a successful thrift store business with his wife, but his troubling behavior persisted. He once urinated on a letter to the Indiana governor in 1985, an act that led to his dismissal from the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. Their lives changed when the family moved into a luxurious estate in the early 1990s. But their marriage soon deteriorated, and while his wife and children often stayed away to avoid the toxic atmosphere, Herb Jr. used his isolation to lead a double life. Under the alias Brian Smart, he frequented gay bars in Indianapolis, luring victims to his secluded home, where he murdered and buried them. The gruesome discovery of a skull by his teenage son in 1994, initially dismissed by Herb Jr. as a medical specimen, eventually led to his wife's suspicions. Despite initial resistance to police involvement, she couldn't shake the image of the skull, especially as their business failed and Herb Jr.'s alcoholism worsened. The couple's eventual separation and her cooperation with the police marked the end of Herb Jr.'s reign of terror. Law enforcement unearthed a grisly scene on the property, but by then Herb Jr. had fled to Canada, where he took his own life. Reflecting on the shocking revelations, Minetta said, "Everyone was in disbelief. We knew the Baumeisters as a normal family. Nothing ever seemed off." Her brief interaction with Herb Jr. haunts her, leaving her to ponder, did I encounter the devil himself? Having since moved away, Minetta is still unsettled by how Herb Jr. managed to deceive so many, including her. He was a chameleon, fooling everyone. I'm glad Dr. Baumeister Sr. didn't live to see the horror his son unleashed.